The sun was barely creeping over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. When I fired up my trusty tractor, oh, how I loved these crisp spring mornings. The breeze was just right, whispering through the fields, carrying the scent of fresh earth. My heart swelled with pride as I thought about my family's legacy. This sprawling 2,000-acre farm handed down through 4 generations. Can you imagine the stories this land could tell? I was out there before dawn, just like my grandfather taught me 30 years ago, ready to plant the seeds that would keep our tradition alive. My phone kept buzzing like an angry hornet, but I brushed it off. Nothing, and I mean nothing, was more important than getting those seeds in the ground. Spring planting waits for no one, not even nosy neighbors. By lunchtime, though, curiosity got the better of me. I plopped down under the old oak tree with my sandwich, expecting maybe a message from my cousin or a reminder about the feed store. Boy, was I wrong. 10 missed calls from neighbors, 3 voicemails from my cousin Tom, and get this, a formal email from the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association with the subject violation notice. I nearly choked on my ham and cheese. Can you believe the nerve? They were whining that my tractor was too loud, disturbing their precious peace. And hold on to your hat, my chicken coops were supposedly stinking up their fancy new neighborhood. Offensive odors? From my hens? I've been raising chickens my whole life, and suddenly they're a problem? The housing development had been there for, 8 measly months. My farm's been standing proud since 1892. The letter had the audacity to demand I stop all farming within 500 feet of their property line in 48 hours or face a $200 daily fine. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off my stump. They thought they could boss me around on my own land? I crumpled that ridiculous notice and tossed it into the dirt. The next morning, I was savoring my coffee when a car door slammed loud enough to wake the dead. Who shows up uninvited at the crack of dawn? A woman in a crisp white pantsuit, striding across my front yard like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, with 2 guys in Oak Ridge Estates polo shirts trailing behind her. "Mr. Jackson," she called out as I stepped onto my porch, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "I'm Karen Wilson, president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. We need to discuss your continued violations." Violations? On my own property? I crossed my arms, feeling my temper flare. "There's nothing to discuss, lady. Your HOA has no say over my land." Karen's smile was so fake, it could have been plastered on a billboard. "Actually," she said, all smug, according to the county zoning board, "your agricultural exemption expired last year. Your property falls under our community standards, now Municipal Code Section 42(3) if you're curious." That hit me like a ton of bricks. Expired? No way! My property taxes hadn't changed one bit. "My family's been farming this land for over a century," I shot back, trying to keep my cool. "No HOA can just waltz in and claim control." Karen's smile turned icy, like she was enjoying this. "Times change, Mr. Jackson. Our residents paid top dollar for homes with guaranteed property values." She thrust another notice into my hands. "This is an official cease and desist." The board voted unanimously to enforce these restrictions. As her little posse strutted back to their car, my phone rang. It was Tom, my cousin who lives in Oak Ridge Estates and sits on the town council. "Mike, you gotta listen," he said, his voice low. "They've been scheming for months. Karen's been holding secret meetings with developers, even altering meeting minutes after they're approved. Something's fishy, real fishy." That night, I was glued to my laptop, digging through county records like a man possessed. Guess what? My agricultural exemption was good for another 5 years. Karen had lied right to my face. Can you imagine the gall? For the next week, I kept working my fields, ignoring the increasingly nasty letters that piled up on my kitchen table. Then the noise complaints started flooding the sheriff's office. Poor Sheriff Davis, an old high school buddy, showed up looking sheepish. "Mike, I hate this," he said, kicking at the dirt. "I know it's absurd, but they're filing complaints every single day. They've even got a petition claiming your farm's a public nuisance. A public nuisance? My farm, which has fed this county for generations. I was floored. Dave, what's really going on here? I asked. He leaned in, voice barely a whisper. I shouldn't say, but there was a closed-door meeting last week. County commissioners, some city developer, and the HOA board. They're pushing for a big project, Mike. Real big. That afternoon, I was checking my fences when I spotted them strangers in fancy suits, traipsing through my eastern fields, snapping photos and measuring like they owned the place. Who do these people think they are? I revved up my truck and barreled across the field. Can I help you, gentlemen? I called out, not even trying to hide my irritation. You're trespassing on private property. The tallest one, all slick in his expensive suit, extended a hand. James Miller, Westview Development Corporation, just surveying for preliminary planning. Planning? On my land? Planning for what exactly? I demanded. This is my farm. Miller looked puzzled, tapping his tablet. According to our paperwork, Westview purchased 1,700 acres from Oak Ridge Estates 3 weeks ago. Construction starts next month. Oak Ridge Commons shopping center and luxury condos. My heart stopped cold. Sold? My land? That's impossible, I roared. I never sold a single acre. Miller showed me his tablet survey maps of my fields, stamped with official county seals, signatures, the works. The owner? Oak Ridge Estates Community Trust. There's gotta be a mistake, I stammered, my throat dry as dust. No mistake, sir, Miller said calmly. Maybe check with Oak Ridge. The sale was finalized last month. I sped home, my mind racing. I yanked open the safe, hands shaking as I checked my property deeds. Everything looked right, but something was horribly wrong. How could this happen? I called the county recorder's office, barely keeping it together. I need to verify my property's ownership status, I said, my voice tight. The clerk, sweet as ever, took my info. One moment, sir. The pause felt like forever. Mr. Jackson, she finally said, there's a filing from 6 weeks ago. It shows 1,700 acres transferred to Oak Ridge Estates Community Trust. You only own the main house and 300 acres now. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the phone. That's impossible. I never signed any transfer. The documents have your signature, sir, she said softly. Want me to email them? When I opened that email, I felt the world tilt. There it was, my signature, clear as day, on transfer documents I'd never laid eyes on. How could the HOA sell land they didn't own? I glanced out my window and saw Karen in her shiny SUV, parked at the edge of my property, chatting on her phone while staring right at my house. When she caught me looking, she flashed a smug smile and waved, like she was daring me to fight back. Bulldozers were coming in 4 weeks. 4 weeks to unravel this nightmare and save my family's legacy before the first shovel hit my soil. I stood there in my muddy boots, the surveyor's words echoing like a bad dream. Sold without my knowledge? Impossible. The first pulled out the property maps I always kept in my truck. This is Johnson family land, I told the surveyor, my voice shaking with fury. Been ours for over a century. He scratched his head, looking uneasy. I just go where they send me, sir, but these coordinates match what Oak Ridge gave us. I didn't wait for more excuses. I drove straight to the county records office, my heart pounding like a drum. Miss S. Rivera, the clerk who's known my family forever, greeted me with a worried frown. Frank, I was going to call you, she said, her voice heavy. Someone filed new documents last month. I thought it was odd, but it all looked notarized. She pulled up the records, and my stomach plummeted. There it was, official paperwork claiming 1,700 acres of my farmland now belonged to Oak Ridge Estates HOA. Only the 300 acres around my house were still mine. This is fraud, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Those signatures aren't mine. I called my lawyer, Sam Grayson, and demanded an emergency meeting. This is the boldest land grab I've seen in 30 years, Sam said, poring over the documents. They've covered their tracks well, Mike. The paperwork claims your grandfather sold development rights decades ago, and they're just now cashing in. That's insane, I snapped. Grandpa would have sooner burned the farm down than sell an inch. I know, Sam said, nodding grimly, but fighting this will take time. They've already sold to developers who probably thought the deal was legit. Time? I didn't have time. The HOA's monthly meeting was that very night, and I wasn't about to sit idly by. I stormed into the Oak Ridge Community Center, where the air buzzed with chatter. Karen Wilson sat at the head table, looking like she'd stepped out of a glossy magazine in her designer outfit, her blonde hair perfect as ever. The room went dead silent when they saw me. "This is a private meeting," Karen said, her voice dripping with ice. "Private?" I shot back, my heart racing. Like the private sale of my land? I stood there, staring down the room, ready to fight for every acre of my family's legacy. How far would you go to protect what's yours? The air in the Oak Ridge Community Center was thick with tension as I stood there, heart pounding like a drum. Richard Thompson, the HOA treasurer, fidgeted with his glasses, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "We have no idea what you're talking about," he stammered. "No idea." "Really? Then how come surveyors were crawling all over my eastern fields today?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Why is there paperwork claiming you sold 1,700 acres of my family's farm to some greedy developers?" Karen Wilson's smile was so fake, it could have been painted on, not even touching her cold eyes. "Maybe you should dig into your family records a little harder, Mr. Johnson," she said, all smug. "That land was part of our development zone from day one." Richard slid a stack of papers across the table with a shaky hand. "It's all legal. The sale's done." I snatched up the documents, my blood boiling. More lies. Forged maps showing boundaries that never existed in 100 years. "My family's got the original deeds from 1892, I said, staring them down. "These are fakes and you know it." Janet Miller, another board member, looked genuinely confused, her brow furrowing. "Karen told us everything was above board," she said, almost to herself. Karen's head snapped toward her, eyes flashing a warning. "This is settled," Karen barked, cutting her off. "Security, get Mr. Johnson out of here." A retired cop, now a part-time security guard, shuffled toward me. "Sorry, Frank," he muttered, looking embarrassed. "Just doing my job." As I was ushered out, my neighbor Tom Baker caught up with me in the parking lot, glancing over his shoulder like he expected Karen to pop out of the shadows. Tom had moved to Oak Ridge last year, chasing that peaceful rural life my farm helped create. Now it was all at risk. "They've been scheming for months," he whispered, voice low. "Secret meetings, plans to expand the community footprint, shady stuff. Why didn't anyone warn me?" I asked, frustration bubbling up. "Karen's got everyone scared," he said. "Jeff Winters questioned the deal's legality last month, and boom, $5,000 in HOA fines out of nowhere. They can bankrupt anyone who steps out of line." I drove home in a fog, my family's legacy slipping through my fingers like sand. Can you imagine? The farm that's fed this community for generations, about to be bulldozed for soulless houses and strip malls. Sleep was impossible. I hauled out my grandfather's old wooden chest, its hinges creaking as I opened it. Inside were treasures of our past birth certificates, faded photos, and then, there it was, the 1943 Water Rights Agreement. My hands trembled as I read it, hope sparking in my chest. My grandfather had allowed a reservoir on our land, supplying not just our farm but the whole area, including Oak Ridge Estates. The fine print was gold. Agricultural use always took priority, and those rights were tied to the 300 acres I still owned. "Oh, Karen, you missed something big." At dawn, I called my lawyer, Sam, barely containing my excitement. They might have stolen my land with their fake papers, I said, but guess what? They forgot who controls their water. Sam yawned, then went quiet. Frank, tread carefully, he warned. This could get nasty. They made it nasty first, I shot back. I'm just playing fair. After hanging up, I spotted a bulldozer silhouette on my eastern field through the morning mist. Already, my heart sank as I grabbed my binoculars. There was Karen, strutting around with men in suits, pointing at my best wheat field like it was her personal playground. Did they really think they could erase my family's work so easily? I threw myself into research, scouring every detail about water rights, easements, and local regulations. If Karen thought she could steamroll a simple farmer, she was in for a shock. That afternoon, I visited old Mr. Patterson, who'd run the county's water systems for 40 years. Oh, I remember that setup, he said, unrolling faded blueprints across his kitchen table. Your granddad was a sharp one. The main control junction's right on your 300 acres, always has been. My phone snapped photos of those blueprints faster than you can say checkmate. What's your plan, Frank? Mr. Patterson asked, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. Just making sure I know my rights, I said with a grin. That night, I walked my property line under a sky full of stars, the twinkling lights of Oak Ridge Estates mocking me in the distance. Enough was enough. I wasn't just fighting for my land, I was going to show Karen and her corrupt board who they'd messed with. My phone burned up with 3 calls. First to Sam, then to the local newspaper to spill the story, and finally to the State Water Authority to set my plan in motion. Game on! What I didn't know was that Karen was toasting with champagne at a fancy HOA party, schmoozing developers and promising them the moon. Construction done in a year, skyrocketing property values, and my eyesore farm gone forever, her words, not mine. Oh, how smug she must have felt. Little did she know what was coming when her precious residents turned on their taps the next morning. The roar of bulldozers ripped me out of bed at dawn. I stumbled outside in my pajamas, my heart breaking as I saw those yellow monsters tearing into my rich, life-giving soil. Stop, I yelled, waving my arms like a madman. You can't do this! The workers didn't even glance my way, crushing my crops like they were nothing. How could this be happening? Karen's black SUV rolled up, and she stepped out, her designer sunglasses glinting in the sun. Her high heels sank into my dirt as she smirked. Progress waits for no one, she said, snapping photos with her phone. Oak Ridge Villas will be the county's most exclusive address, 30 homes, starting at a cool $1 million each. My stomach churned. This land feeds thousands, I pleaded. You can't just pave it over. She laughed, actually laughed. We already did, she said, flashing her phone's screen with a digital mock-up of gaudy mansions where my cornfields stood. Papers are signed. County approved the zoning change last week. As she drove off, she swerved just enough to splash mud all over my boots. My hands shook with rage as I watched my life's work vanish under those tracks. That evening, my neighbor Emma called, her voice urgent. Have you seen their social media? The HOA's gloating online. I pulled up their page, and there was Karen, posing with Richard and the developers, champagne glasses raised like they'd won the lottery. The caption? Expanding Oak Ridge Estates, goodbye outdated farming, hello luxury living. The comments were a wildfire of anger from locals who loved my farm's fresh produce. At least the community had my back, but would it be enough? Sleep was a lost cause. I paced my kitchen till 3 a.m., papers strewn across the table, birth certificates, tax forms, old maps. Then I found it, my great-grandfather's 1922 water rights agreement. I read it once, twice, my grin growing wider. Jackpot. At sunrise, I called Sarah, my old college buddy turned water rights attorney. They didn't do their homework, she said, chuckling as she reviewed my docs. Your family owns the water rights to the whole valley. The easement only lets others use it if it doesn't mess with your farming. Oh, I knew exactly what to do next. By noon, I was at the County Water Authority, filing paperwork with a calm I didn't feel. The clerk's eyes bugged out as she read my request. "You sure about this?" she asked. "This'll hit hundreds of homes." "Dead sure," I said, steady as a rock. "I'm redirecting the water allocation my legal right." 2 days later, I was munching toast when my phone exploded with notifications texts, voicemails, Facebook messages from furious Oak Ridge residents. Their water had trickled to nothing, then stopped cold. Karen called 17 times before I picked up. "What did you do?" she shrieked, so loud I winced. "Nothing illegal," I said, spreading butter like it was just another morning. "I'm using my water rights per the 1922 agreement. It says I can prioritize my farm. People need water to live." Richard yelled in the background. "They need food too," I snapped. "I'm redirecting all water to my 300 acres to ramp up production since you stole the rest of my land." Karen's tone flipped to syrupy sweet. "Maybe we rushed things," she cooed. "We could talk compensation." "Talk?" I cut her off. "The time for talking was before you forged documents and robbed me blind." I hung up, stepping outside to feel the sun on my face. My irrigation system hummed, water flowing only to my fields now. Let them sweat, I thought. This farmer's just getting started. Dust swirled around my boots as 3 police cars rolled up my driveway, their lights flashing like some dramatic movie scene. My stomach nodded, but I stood tall. Sheriff Miller, a guy I'd known since we were tossing footballs in high school, stepped out first, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Got complaints about water tampering, Frank," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Tampering? Can you believe it?" I handed him my stack of papers. Every page a piece of my family's history. "Everything I've done is legal, Sheriff. My family's owned these water rights for over a century clear as day right here." As he flipped through the documents, a news van screeched to a halt. Karen must have called them, thinking she'd spin this into her sob story. Oh, was she in for a surprise? Julie Ramirez from Channel 5 bounded over, microphone in hand, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Mr. Johnson, can you explain what's going on with the water supply?" she asked. A grin spread across my face finally, a chance to set the record straight. "I'd love to," I said, pulling out my weathered maps and water rights documents. "And while we're at it, let's talk about how the Oak Ridge HOA forged papers to steal 1,700 acres of my family's farmland, passed down for generations." Julie's jaw dropped, and I could practically see the gears turning. She knew she'd stumbled onto a blockbuster story. Water dispute? Ha! This was fraud, betrayal, and a fight for my legacy. By evening, the HOA was in a tailspin, calling an emergency meeting I wasn't invited to. But my neighbor Tom, bless him, kept me in the loop with texts that lit up my phone like fireworks. "They're losing it," he wrote. Developers stopped construction cold, threatening to sue the HOA for lying through their teeth. Property values are tanking already. I could almost hear Karen's perfect world crumbling. Then, at 11:42 p.m., my doorbell rang, startling me from my coffee. Who shows up at that hour? Karen, of all people, stood there, her flawless makeup streaked, her usual swagger gone. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking like thin ice, "turn the water back on. Families have kids. Elderly parents, they can't live without water." I leaned against the doorframe, letting her words hang in the air. "Sounds rough," I said coolly. "Maybe they should be mad at the folks who caused this mess in the first place." Her eyes widened, desperate. "We can talk compensation," she blurted. "Compensation? After all this?" I locked eyes with her. "I don't want your money, Karen. I want my land back." Her face tightened, that fake charm fading fast. "That's impossible," she snapped. "The contracts are signed." "Then we're done here," I said, starting to shut the door. "Wait," she yelped, practically lunging forward. "The developers, they might rethink things if water's an issue. I can arrange a meeting." I studied her, weighing my options. Could I trust her? Not a chance, but I'd play her game for now. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. My kitchen table, I said. Bring the developers, your lawyer, and every single one of those fake documents you used to rob me. As she scurried to her car, I glanced at Oak Ridge Estates. Every house lit up like a Christmas tree. Nobody was sleeping tonight, were they? They were all wondering the same thing. How did they miss that their water came from my land? 3 days later, my hands were shaking as I stepped into the courthouse, cameras flashing like a lightning storm. Someone had tipped off the news, and our fight was now the talk of the county. Oak Ridge Estates was in chaos. No water for 3 days meant families were fleeing to hotels just to shower. The courtroom was a battleground, split right down the middle. Karen and her HOA cronies sat on one side, decked out in their designer outfits, looking smug as ever. Across the aisle were my people farmers in worn boots, folks who worked my land, families who counted on my crops. My heart swelled seeing them there. Would we pull this off? All rise! The bailiff bellowed as Judge Martinez swept in. Karen shot me a smirk, like she thought she'd already won. Oh, honey, just wait. My lawyer, M. Rodriguez, took the floor, cool as a cucumber. Your Honor, this land has been farmed by the Johnson family for over 130 years, she said, laying out aerial photos from the 1950s that showed our fields in all their glory. I'd like to enter the original 1892 land grant into evidence. Karen's lawyer leaped up like he'd been stung. Objection. Old papers mean nothing. We've got a modern sale agreement signed last month. Judge Martinez's frown deepened. I'll decide what matters, he said sternly. Continue, Miss Rodriguez. My pulse raced as M. Rodriguez unveiled our ace, a massive map tracing every water line in the county. This property controls water access for the entire region, she explained, pointing to my 300 acres. The easement agreement clearly states agricultural use gets priority always. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. I watched Karen's face, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. Did she finally realize she'd underestimated me? Karen's lawyer strutted forward, waving their sale documents like they were carved in stone. Official stamps, signatures, the works. But M. Rodriguez was ready. Your Honor, we had these papers checked by 3 experts, she said, handing over a thick folder. They found 7 signs of tampering, including digital tweaks to the property lines. The judge's brow furrowed as he scanned the evidence. These are serious claims, he said, his voice heavy. Serious? Try criminal. There's more, M. Rodriguez said, her voice cutting through the room. Her assistant wheeled in a cart stacked with 5 boxes of documents. We subpoenaed the HOA board's bank records. Karen's face went white as a sheet, and Richard, the treasurer, started sweating buckets. These show unusual deposits to 5 board members' personal accounts within 48 hours of the land sale, M. Rodriguez said. Deposits matching exactly 2% of the sale price, split evenly among them. The courtroom exploded gasps, shouts, chaos. Judge Martinez slammed his gavel. Order! I said order. In the frenzy, I caught Karen glaring at Richard. Her lips curled in fury. She was scrambling for a scapegoat. We need a recess, her lawyer yelped. These accusations are baseless. We need time to respond. The judge granted a 30-minute break, and as folks spilled into the hallway, I stayed put, trying to steady my racing heart. Tom slid beside me, grinning. You're winning, Frank, he whispered. Half the HOA looks ready to ditch Karen. Out in the hall, I overheard Karen and Richard bickering in a corner. You said this was foolproof, Richard hissed, his voice shaking. Now we're staring down criminal charges. Karen's perfect facade cracked wide open. How was I supposed to know about some dusty water rights document? She snapped. Nobody reads that fine print. Well, someone should have. Richard fired back. The developers are ready to sue us for lying. I hid a smirk, pretending to scroll my phone. They were imploding. Could it get any better? When court resumed, the air had shifted. Karen's lawyer asked for a private huddle with the judge and M. Rodriguez. They whispered at the bench for what felt like forever. Finally, Judge Martinez faced the room. Based on the evidence, I'm issuing an immediate injunction stopping all development on the disputed one, 700 acres. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. It wasn't over, but it was a start. Furthermore, he continued, I'm ordering a full investigation into the HOA's documents. If fraud is confirmed, this goes to the district attorney. Karen slumped in her seat, looking like the wind had been knocked out of her. As the crowd filed out, Miss S. Jensen, an elderly HOA resident, approached me, her eyes soft. I had no idea they were pulling this, she said quietly. Most of us didn't. We just wanted nice homes. My heart softened. I get it, I told her. This isn't about hurting folks like you. It's about stopping corrupt leaders. Outside, the developer's rep, Mr. Davis, was waiting, tugging nervously at his tie. Mr. Johnson, he said, offering a shaky handshake, we were misled by the HOA. We bought that land thinking it was legit. Was he for real? I searched his face. Your bulldozers trash crops that feed hundreds, I said, my voice tight. He flinched. We want to fix this. We're suing the HOA, but we'd rather work with you directly. I thought of my workers, the local diners, the families counting on my farm. A legal war could drag on for years. Was there another way? Come to the farm tomorrow, I said. I've got some ideas that might work for us both. As I headed to my truck, Karen stormed past, her lawyer trailing her like a shadow. She stopped dead when she saw me, her eyes blazing with hate. This isn't over, she hissed. You think you've won, but my husband golfs with the mayor. We have connections you can't touch. I just smiled, calm as a summer breeze. Save your energy for your lawyer, Karen. Fraud charges can be a real headache. Her face turned beet red, and for a split second, I thought she might swing at me right there on the courthouse steps. Instead, she jabbed a finger in my direction. You'll regret this, she spat. Nobody makes a fool of me. As she stomped off, Richard lingered, looking panicked. The news cameras caught it all. Karen's meltdown was about to go viral. Tom sidled up, barely hiding his grin. The other board members are talking emergency elections, he whispered. Nobody's going down with Karen's sinking ship. I nodded, watching her disappear into the crowd. I'd won this round, but the fight wasn't over. I still had to reclaim my land, and Karen wasn't the type to wave a white flag. But standing there with the sun warm on my face, hope surged through me. Sometimes justice does win, especially when you hold the key to the water. The morning sun glittered across my eastern field, each dew-kissed stalk of corn sparkling like a tiny jewel. Can you believe it? 6 months after the fight of my life, I stood there, heart bursting, watching farmers tend to every single one of my 700 acres land. That was mine again. Those monstrous bulldozers that had ripped into my family's legacy were long gone, banished by a judge who saw through the HOA's lies and threw out their forged sale papers. I still can't believe we pulled it off, my wife said, her warm hands squeezing mine as we gazed over our restored farmland, alive with promise. We didn't just win, sweetheart, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We turned everything around. The day after our courtroom triumph, my phone went wild, reporters from every corner of the country blowing it up. The story of a greedy HOA trying to swipe a family farm struck a chord far and wide. Messages poured in from strangers, their words lifting my spirit. Farmers from states I'd never visited sent boxes of their own homegrown tomatoes, carrots, even zucchini, gifts of solidarity that made my eyes sting. Who knew so many cared? But oh, they did. And it felt like the whole world was rooting for us. Karen and her HOA cronies, they couldn't dodge the spotlight no matter how hard they tried. News crews parked outside their ritzy houses, microphones ready, grilling them about the dirty kickback cash they'd pocketed. Richard, that nervous treasurer, cracked like an egg on live TV, tears streaming as he spilled it all. We planned it in secret, over champagne and late-night meetings. He sobbed into the camera. We thought nobody'd care about some old farm. Old farm? My family's pride? Oh, Richard, people cared a whole lot. The public's outrage was like a wildfire, and it burned right through their smug little world. 3 weeks after the judge's gavel fell, I got a knock at my door that caught me off guard. The developer's new CEO stood there, a woman with kind eyes and none of the old boss's arrogance he'd been canned over the scandal. "We messed up, Mr. Johnson," she said, sitting at my kitchen table as I slid over a plate of my wife's legendary oatmeal cookies, still warm from the oven. "If we'd known the truth, we'd never have touched your land." I leaned back, curious. "So what's next for your company?" Her face lit up. "That's why I'm here. Would you consider legally, this time selling just 50 acres for something that could benefit everyone? No luxury mansions, no cookie-cutter condos. Instead, she pitched a modern farming facility on a tiny corner of my land, a hub to process crops from farms county-wide, including mine, jobs for locals, a boost for farmers, and get this, a farming education center where city kids could dig in the dirt and learn where their food comes from. Could it really work? What about the HOA? I asked, wary of Karen's lingering shadow. "They'll have zero say," she swore, her voice firm. "This is between us." Speaking of the HOA, their next meeting was a whole new scene. Tom Baker, my neighbor who'd risked Karen's wrath to tip me off, was now president-elected after Karen and half the board quit in shame. The new board voted, not a single nay, to greenlight my farming operation and carve out a buffer zone between our properties. Tom and I walked that line together one evening, the air sweet with fresh-cut grass. "Most folks moved here for the rural charm," he said, kicking a pebble. "We never wanted to erase what makes this place special, Frank." Special? That's my farm, our farm, and hearing that warmed my soul. Karen and Richard weren't off the hook, not by a long shot. The district attorney dug up bank transfers, hard proof of the cash they'd skimmed from the fake land deal. Karen's world unraveled fast, her big house sold to cover legal bills, her husband filing for divorce after the scandal broke. Sometimes I'd catch her driving by my fields, her face tight with fury, eyes glaring at the land she'd tried to steal. Did she think she could outsmart us all? Not this time. As summer faded into fall, we broke ground on the new processing center, and let me tell you, it was a party. Local farmers rolled up with homemade pies, creamy potato salads, and beans fresh from their gardens. Even Oak Ridge Estates folks showed up, some sheepish, admitting Karen's threats of massive fines had kept them quiet. "My grandpa was a farmer," one older man said, his voice soft as he shook my hand. "I hated what they were doing to you." Hated it? That meant the world to hear. The music played, kids laughed, and for the first time I felt the divide between us start to mend. By winter, something incredible happened. Our communities began to knit together. We launched a weekly farmers market right on the line between my land and Oak Ridge. Families from the development signed up for crop shares, plunking down cash for crates of our sweet corn, juicy tomatoes, and crisp greens all season long. The water rights? Sorted out with a new agreement, fair as could be, ensuring my farm got what it needed while their homes stayed flowing. And the HOA? They rewrote their bylaws for good, shielding farming from their petty complaints. Can you imagine a better turnaround? A year after our court win, we threw a community harvest festival on those very fields. Karen tried to snatch. Kids from both sides, farmers and Oak Ridge alike, shrieked with joy, weaving through a corn maze we built just for them. Parents swapped stories over steaming mugs of apple cider, their faces glowing in the sunset's orange light. Tom found me as the sky turned to fire. "Ever wonder what would have happened if they'd pulled it off?" he asked, his voice low. I scanned the crowd, folks savoring food grown right here, on soil we'd fought for. Every single day, I admitted. But then I remember something. What's that? He said, tilting his head. Fancy houses and perfect lawns don't feed souls. This land grows more than crops, it grows us. Together. Tom nodded, a slow smile spreading. Karen never got that, did she? All she saw was money. I glanced over at my oldest son, grinning wide as he taught an Oak Ridge teen to steer our little tractor. Both of them doubled over laughing. You know the best revenge? I said, my heart full. It's watching Karen drive by, day after day, seeing this place not just surviving, but thriving. She lost it all, Tom, but look at us, we gained everything. That night, as my family gathered around our table, plates piled high with food we'd grown with our own hands, I realized something profound. The HOA had tried to break us, to strip away our land, our legacy. But instead, they'd handed me a gift they never meant to give. They'd shown an entire community why this farm matters, why it's the heartbeat of this place. And that truth, it'll nourish people's hearts long after Karen's dreams of mansions have crumbled to dust.